On Christmas, while I worked a double shift saving lives, my family told my 15-year-old daughter there was no place for her at their table. She drove home alone and spent the night in a cold, empty house. I didn't cause a scene. That's not how I work. Instead, I made a choice. Took action. By the next morning, my parents were standing on their porch screaming after finding the letter I'd left for them. Christmas Eve, I finally made it home, dragging my bones through the front door just before midnight, around 11:30. I was completely spent. One of my last patients was a man who kept saying he was just tired, but he was turning blue while I was doing chest compressions. That kind of shift. So when I saw Tessa's boots sitting by the front door, my first thought was that something bad had happened, maybe someone was hurt. Then I noticed her coat, slouched across the arm of the couch like she'd dropped it without much thought. Her overnight bag was still zipped shut, untouched. And there she was curled up on the sofa, sleeping in that uncomfortable, guarded kind of way, like she didn't trust the cushions to hold her weight. I stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. She was supposed to be staying at my parents' place. It was tradition. Every year. She'd begged me to let her drive herself this time. Just got her license, and she was so proud. Left early too, trying to make a good impression. My husband and I were both stuck working late shifts, so it seemed like a solid plan. Until it all fell apart. Because of Tessa. I said her name quietly, just above a whisper. She opened her eyes right away, like she hadn't actually been asleep at all. "Hey," she said. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She sat up slowly. "They told me there wasn't any room," she said. Her voice was calm, but something inside it cracked a little. I blinked, confused. "Room where?" "At the table," she said, and this time her voice wavered right down the middle. She tried to shake it off with a shrug, but it didn't land. "They said they weren't expecting me. That there were already too many people there. Grandma told me she couldn't just add another chair last minute. She looked like I was just another problem to solve." "But you got there on time, didn't you?" "Yeah, I was right on time," she said. She told me Grandma had opened the door and just stood there looking surprised, like Tessa had shown up to the wrong holiday. Then came the excuses. No bed left. Which wasn't true. And they didn't want her driving back in the dark, but also didn't have another option for her to stay. So she left. "Did anyone even offer to drive you back?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nope." I just stared at her, trying to believe it. "Did they at least let you eat?" Another shrug. Table was full. Sophie was sitting where I usually sit. Grandpa was talking to her like she was the guest of honor or something. No one even looked at me. Then Grandma said, "It's just a full house this year." And Aunt Rachel nodded like that explained everything. So, I left. She looked toward the kitchen and added, "I made toast." I turned to see what she meant. Sitting on the counter was a single slice of toast on a paper towel, cold and slightly bent. Next to it was half a banana. That was her Christmas dinner. Something tight twisted in my chest. It wasn't quite anger yet. More like that cold, brittle feeling right before everything breaks apart. "I wasn't hungry anyway," she said, trying to sound casual. But her eyes were filling fast. She looked up, fighting it. Blinked hard. Bit her lip like she could chew through the tears. "They made me feel like I was being rude," she whispered. Like just showing up, even though I was invited, was somehow wrong. And then she started crying. Quiet tears, slow ones. Like a faucet with a worn-out washer you can't quite turn off. "I was gonna bring a pie," she said. But I figured they'd already have enough food. I sat down next to her and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me without hesitation, like she'd been holding herself up out of sheer spite and finally didn't have to anymore. After a while, she wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I know they don't like you," she said. "But I thought," she stopped herself. "You thought you were just the kid. Not part of that stuff," I finished for her. She nodded. "They didn't even say it like they were being mean," she added. "It was more like a logistical problem. Like I was just this folding chair they didn't have room to set up." I didn't go to bed right away. I stayed up in the kitchen, staring at her bag, still zipped. She'd packed it so carefully. Picked out the sweater my mom once complimented. Baked cookies and brought them in a little holiday tin. I opened the fridge. There was nothing special in there. We hadn't stocked up for a backup Christmas. Why would we? We trusted them. And that's the part that stuck with me. Not the toast. Not the silence at the table. Not even that she had to drive home in the dark. It was the fact that they looked her in the eye, the sweet, shy, brave kid who showed up on time, with a smile and a tin of cookies, and told her, in a house full of 28 people, that there wasn't a place for her. They didn't mean there was no room. They meant not you. The next morning, my husband got home. Tessa was still asleep. I told him what happened. He stood there for a long time. Then he asked, "So, what do we do now?" I didn't say anything right away. But I already knew. Because there's a difference between turning the other cheek and turning away a 16-year-old who just wanted to be included. And they chose the latter. I didn't lose it. I didn't shout. I just took action. And the next morning, my parents found a letter on their doorstep. And they started screaming. I once joked that maybe I'd just marry myself. My mom didn't even crack a smile. And when it came time for support, they didn't give me a single dollar. I made it through med school waiting tables. Took every miserable shift no one else wanted. Came home with aching feet and a kind of exhaustion that sinks into your bones. But to my family, I was living the dream. Not once did they come visit. Not once. Years later, after grinding through 2 residencies, I finally landed my first stable job, the kind that made me think, maybe I can actually breathe now. I met my husband during an overnight shift, both of us barely holding ourselves upright. I guess there's a certain romance in being equally sleep-deprived. Eventually, we moved to a place where dinner didn't mean instant noodles and stale granola bars. That's when the phone calls started. "Can you help with the electric bill? Can you co-sign this lease? Hey, could you ask one of your doctor friends about Uncle Marvin's weird lump?" I did what I could. Most of it without thinking twice. When my parents hit retirement age way too early, and with absolutely nothing saved, I stepped up. They'd never owned a house, always bounced from one rental to the next. Bad credit, bad luck, bad choices, take your pick. So I bought a modest little 2-bedroom and handed them the keys. Told them it was a gift. I said I'd take care of the mortgage. The deed's in my name, but they live there like it's their own. Rent-free. I cover utilities more often than not. Medical stuff? They've got access to insurance through me. And I never once said no. At least, not until recently. A few months back, Rachel called me. Her daughter Sophie, the golden child who walks on air, had just gotten accepted into some elite STEM summer program. "She's got your brain," Rachel said, like it was the highest compliment she could manage. This could really change her life. I asked how much. $1,200, she said. But it's totally worth it. And come on, you of all people. That's where I stopped listening. See, Tessa never asked for stuff like that. Not because she couldn't have had it, but because that's not how she is. She's thoughtful, practical, never wanted to be a burden. Even though she could have asked, she didn't. So I told Rachel no. Firm, but polite. I explained that I was already covering our parents' mortgage, their medical bills, every little, just this once, that had become permanent. Suggested she look into financial aid. Maybe a payment plan. Her tone flipped immediately. Wow. Must be nice to have everything and still be that stingy. She's your niece, you know. Then came the jab. You're just jealous because Sophie's actually going places. That one would have been funny if it hadn't echoed something I overheard from my mother a few days later. She didn't know I was within earshot when she muttered that I was holding Sophie back. Just like I'd always held Rachel back. By being the smart one. The one who made everyone else look bad, just by existing. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I just said no. And I meant it. That was 3 weeks before Christmas. Tessa was genuinely excited for the family dinner. Said she felt like a grown-up, getting to drive herself there for the first time. She packed an overnight bag and even wrapped little presents for the younger cousins. Before she left, I told her I'd see her in the morning. Reminded her to text when she arrived. She did. Everything seemed normal. Until I walked through our front door later that night and realized that normal had been quietly canceled behind my back. Tessa looked up from the couch with a shaky smile, the kind that begs you to pretend everything's fine. In the smallest voice, she told me that Grandma had murmured there was no room at the table. Or anywhere else. Even though she'd counted 24 chairs in use. A math problem with just one variable, her. I didn't say much. Just listened as her words fell heavy into the space between us, like a suitcase dropped from chest height. Then I wrapped my arms around her and let the silence fill the rest. She eventually dozed off, still wearing the sweater she'd chosen to impress them. Once the house settled, I found myself in the kitchen, sitting alone, staring at where her Christmas dinner should have been. I thought about every payment I'd made on their behalf. Every "this is the last time" bill that never actually was. They didn't run out of room. They ran out of gratitude. And they used my daughter to deliver the message. That was the moment something inside me flipped. It wasn't a decision so much as a realization. No more explanations. No more polite negotiations. I wasn't deciding if I'd act just when. The drive to their house was mostly quiet. My husband sat next to me, his hand resting on my knee. Not to comfort me, exactly. Just to remind me he was there. That was enough. The morning after Christmas always feels a little disoriented, like the world is hungover on sugar, wrapping paper, and unmet expectations. I was hoping the house would be empty. It wasn't. There were still 2 extra cars in the driveway. One was Rachel's. The other, probably some cousin who stuck around for leftover ham. We got out. I had the envelope clutched tight in my hand. I hadn't slept. The night shift. Tessa's story. That cold little plate of toast still sitting on the counter. All of it buzzing in my head like a bad circuit. I rang the doorbell. Waited. Nothing. I rang again. Knocked. Still nothing. Let's just leave it, my husband said gently. I stood there a moment longer, then gave a small nod. We turned back toward the car. I slid the envelope into a safe spot near the door where it wouldn't blow away. I was just about to open the car door when I heard it. The screen creaked open. A soft shuffle. Then my mother stepped out wrapped in one of those cheap, fuzzy robes she always bragged about getting for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and started reading. Her face went flat, then pale, and then she screamed. "George!" Her voice cracked, sharp like an electrical wire snapping loose. "George, get out here. She's throwing us out." My dad stepped into the doorway, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "What the hell?" Rachel trailed in behind them, cradling a coffee mug like she'd expected a cozy holiday morning. "What's going on?" My mom turned and jabbed her finger toward me like I was something dirty she'd found on her porch. "You ungrateful little." We got in the car before I could catch the end of it. Didn't matter. I'd heard all their greatest hits before. By the time we pulled into our driveway, my phone was already lighting up. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the 6th call, I picked up. "How dare you?" my mother shouted. No hello. No breath. Not even a phony check-in about Tessa. "You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. Could still hear my dad yelling in the background. "If you go through with this, you're no daughter of ours." They didn't ask what happened. Didn't ask why. They didn't even say Tessa's name. Not once. Not a single moment of reflection. So I hung up. They kept calling anyway. Then Rachel started in with the texts. One actually said, "This is going to ruin your reputation. Think about your career." Oh, sweetie. My patients don't care where my parents live. They care that I know how to stop bleeding and diagnose a stroke in under 5 minutes. By the time the sun went down, my phone looked like it had just gotten dumped. 32 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to write, "Not my place, but this feels extreme. You only get one, Mom." I didn't respond to a single one. The next morning, someone knocked on the door. I checked the peephole. Of course, my mother. She was standing there in that same fuzzy robe, the one she lives in during the holidays, clutching the eviction notice like it was a lifeline, now crumpled and damp, like she'd been twisting it in her hands for hours. I opened the door but didn't say a word. Didn't invite her in. She didn't wait for that part. "You're really doing this," she hissed, eyes flashing. "After everything we've done for you?" I let the silence sit there. Then I said, steady and low, "You mean the house I bought you? The bills I've covered? The insurance I set up because Medicare won't touch your blood pressure meds?" She flinched. Just for a second. Then straightened up, eyes sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You didn't even let my daughter eat Christmas dinner," I said. That one stopped her. Briefly. Then she bounced right back. "Don't be dramatic. We didn't have enough chairs." "There were 28 people there," I said. "Including a neighbor." Her mouth clamped shut. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I added. "But if you think you can treat Tessa like she's disposable." "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped, voice rising. "Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing your family apart over a misunderstanding. And now you're threatening your own parents." She waved the letter in the air like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. Then, in the most performative move I've seen outside of a school play, she ripped it clean down the middle. "There," she said. "That's done." Then came the smile. That smug, world tilted back on its axis smile. "Now, if you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Sophie's science camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum." She thought she'd solved it. As if all it took was a little paper drama and a payment plan. I didn't respond. Because in that moment, I saw it for what it really was. They had never, not once, taken me seriously. Not when I was dissecting birds at 6. Not when I got into medical school. Not even now, standing on my own porch with my own mother treating me like a rebellious teenager. To them, I was still that awkward, too curious girl with the big brain and the bigger mouth. The one they barely tolerated, never respected. They thought I wouldn't follow through. They were wrong. So I let her mutter her way down the steps, robes dragging, playing the tragic heroine. I closed the door behind her. Quiet. Steady. But in my mind, I was already on to the next move. She'd torn the eviction letter like it was a flyer for a discount window cleaning service. Right after calling me selfish, heartless, and mentally unstable. And then had the gall to smile and say, "We'll forgive you." Like they were the ones offering grace. Like pushing my daughter out into the cold was some tiny social faux pas I was overreacting to. 2 mornings later, I sat down with a lawyer. I laid everything out, the mortgage I'd paid for 7 years, the house still in my name, the quiet ways I'd covered for them. Utility bills, dental plans, even that surprise root canal Dad never thanked me for. The lawyer barely blinked. "Sounds like you're ready for formal eviction," he said, like he was commenting on the weather. I nodded. The paperwork went out that week. 60 days. Stamped. Signed. Done. This time, no amount of tearing or tantrums would make it disappear. I kept paying the mortgage, wasn't about to torch my credit just to make a point. But everything else? Gone. No more utilities. No cable. No medical reimbursements. Nothing. They got a crash course in what no help really feels like. 2 weeks later, another knock. It was Aunt Brenda. She was always supposed to be the nice one. Carried a tin of cookies, wore that face of polite concern like it was part of her church clothes. "Monica," she said. "I just want to talk." I let her in. Poured her tea neither of us touched. "It just doesn't sound like you," she began gently. "Throwing your parents out over." She paused, searching for the word. "A misunderstanding." I gave a short, sharp laugh. Not the kind that invites company. Then I told her. About the house. The years of bills. The Christmas Eve fallout. How they'd made room for 28 people, neighbors, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, but somehow couldn't find space for Tessa. Not a seat. Not a bed. Not even a sandwich. Aunt Brenda turned pale. I didn't know, she said. They didn't tell you, I corrected. She left like someone who couldn't unhear what they'd just heard. 3 days later, she sent a text. I didn't understand before. I do now. 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called. They haven't moved, he said. Then we proceed, I told him. I listed the house that same day. Fair price. Not a penny more than what it was worth. I wasn't trying to squeeze them. I just wanted it done. A buyer jumped quickly. Families love that area. The catch? Vacant possession required. They need to be out, my agent said. Understood, I replied. I didn't go when they were removed. Left that part to the professionals. I heard it wasn't a smooth exit, but what came next wasn't smoother. Rachel took them in. Of course she did. She always loved stepping into the role of better daughter. Even had a little press tour with the cousins. She abandoned them, she told everyone. Over a holiday mix-up. 3 weeks later, she showed up on my porch, eyes bloodshot, hair a frizzed mess. She didn't even say hello. I can't do it, she said, like we were picking up a conversation halfway through. They're fighting constantly. Mom says the living room's too small. Dad says my kids are too loud. They won't share a bathroom. I'm losing my mind. She stared at me like I was supposed to solve it. They need a rental, she said. You could help. Just enough for a deposit. I crossed my arms and leaned into the doorframe. No, Monica. You stood there while your niece got turned away on Christmas Eve. That was your choice. I let it sit. This is mine. She blinked like she hadn't expected that, then turned and walked away. A week later, she kicked them out too. They landed in some dingy rental nobody brags about. 2 rooms. 1 old heater. A front step that leaned like a shrug. Their pension barely covered food, let alone rent. No more cruises. No more big dinners. No more Instagram anniversary dreams. They started working the phones, calling up every branch of the extended family they could find, telling them I'd cut them off. No warning. That I was unstable. That I'd always been cold. But by then, I'd already done the quiet work. Reached out to a few uncles. Sent some cousins copies of the bills I'd paid over the years. Attached the eviction letter, time-stamped and certified. Just facts, no commentary. One cousin replied with a simple, wow. Another sent a thumbs-up emoji. Nobody came rushing to their defense. And I wasn't rushing to change my mind. 2 months later, Tessa and I were out on the porch, sipping iced tea. No plans. No tension. Just a soft, quiet afternoon. She looked over at me and said, you know, I don't miss them. And the truth was, I didn't either. My phone buzzed. A familiar number. I opened it without thinking. Hope you're proud of what you've done. I deleted it. No second thought. No pause. They'll probably text again, Tessa said, her voice light, almost amused. They always do, I said back. But it didn't matter anymore. Because they weren't my problem. Not anymore. They'd told my daughter there wasn't room for her at the table. So now? There's no room left in our lives for cruelty. For manipulation. For guilt disguised as tradition. Fast forward 2 years. They're still in that sagging rental. Still blaming everyone but themselves. Still spinning stories that don't hold up. Meanwhile, Tessa's thriving. She's studying what she loves, surrounded by people who respect her. And the money from the house sale? It covered more than tuition. It bought her freedom. It gave her peace. And me? It gave me closure. A clean break. I don't answer their calls. I don't send money. I don't spend nights wondering if I should have done more. Because I did do more. I protected my daughter. I chose her. Finally. But now I'll ask you, did I go too far? Or did I go just far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if this story hit home, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more.